and Davidson, and we are merging this with motion 6 by councillors Jacqueline Cameron and Jennifer Adam, and that's item 12 on the agenda. Yes?
I'm happy to accept motion 6 as an addition or an amendment to our motion, if that is acceptable to the movers, rather than dealing it as two separate motions.
Yeah. Is it an addition? Yeah. Okay, councillor Jacqueline Cameron? You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Provost.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just point out that there are some people in the chamber who have got an interest in the Waspi issue. They're here with their dual hats on, I think, today. Both Unison members and Waspi women. So again, welcome. Okay, so the proposal has been made to add on motion 6 to motion 4, and both movers are in agreement. Do we have any other amendments? Okay, that's agreed then.
Agreed.
Oh, okay, Alison. Was there? Oh, so my apologies. There is an amendment. Okay. So there's an amendment from Councillor Leishman, seconded by Councillor McGonigal. Councillor Leishman. Has it been distributed? Can I just check? Have you sent the amendment to the officer? Okay. Just give us a wee second. We'll double check, Councillor Leishman. Okay, we found it. Okay. Okay, we're going to forward it on to the members now, so we'll give you a wee minute to have a read of that. It's just sent. Oh, disregard that, please, quickly.
Carol, that amendment was the Australian one.
You'll find it, Carol, no? Could you send it, Councillor Leishman? If you don't mind, could you try again?
No, sorry, Councillor Leishman, if I can come in, we have to have it in writing because we've got members that are not in the chamber, and we need to send it on. None of the officers can see any email having come in from you. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm happy to give you a couple of minutes. You can just chat amongst yourselves for a wee minute. Another compliment. Yeah. I'm fully ready. Carol.
Nobody gets spam.
Send it to Dave. Forward it to Dave. Disaster averted. Oh well. Might need to have a very long comfort break. Okay, I think it should be in your hitting your inboxes any second. If you've not already had it, could you please have a wee read of the amendment from Councillor Leishman, particularly the movers of the motions? Councillors, could you stop blethering? Right, okay, you've sent the wrong one.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we cheeky. You're getting around, Jim Patterson. No, we've already started considering the item, and we've heard from the mover of one of the motions, so we really need to finish this. We definitely have it now. I bet my life in it. Right, that's it been sent. Okay, so Councillor Dowling and Councillor Jacqueline Cameron, you'll need to let me know if you want to accept the amendment.
That statement is already contained within the existing text of the motion now, so I won't accept that amendment at this time.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I would like to scratch my previous remarks from the record, and I reject this amendment.
Okay, we're having a good day today, aren't we? And Jacqueline, are you? Okay, okay. You can still speak to your amendment if you wish to, Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Provost, and I promise I'll keep this brief, because I can assure the movers of this motion and hopefully the full council that I absolutely do not intend to be combative about this. My intention is to actually take a more conciliatory approach. I and my group are actually broadly sympathetic with the Waspi movement and the feeling of injustice that they're experiencing. We simply just wanted to go for a more harmonious and cross-party approach, and as Conservatives, we do believe in our party, and we do believe and hope that we can steer our party in the right direction with this, but we'd just rather do it through exhortation and more diplomatic language. And I think that's all I really have to say, except with the exception of some wording, we are broadly sympathetic with this motion. I hope that covers, and I hope the movers of the motion can accept my amendment in good faith.
Okay, well, we'll find out soon. Councillor McGonigal?
Yeah, a second and reserve the right, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ann-Dowling?
I appreciate Councillor Leishman's words, and I think they are very welcome, but in this occasion, I don't accept the amendment.
Okay. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Provost. I first raised the plight of Waspi women in this chamber 7 years ago, believe it or not. It is staggering that 7 years on, Waspi women continue to suffer disappointing blows as the DWP delays in setting a date for a compensation announcement. The equalisation of the state pension age between men and women resulted in many women born in the 1950s getting less in retirement than they had planned for. Campaigners have had to fight to get government ministers to take action over historic injustice resulting from changes to the state pension age for women, and failures and mistakes in the notice they were given, referred to as maladministration in the final Waspi report to UK Parliament, following a 5-year investigation by the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman. Waspi women argue that the government did not give some women adequate time to make alternative plans after finding out the state pension age would be pushed back, and that argument has now been vindicated in this PHSO report.
Right. Good.
The Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign are demanding compensation for up to 3.6 million women following the publication of the PHSO final report. Thousands of these women are our constituents in Renfrewshire, and I'd also like to welcome local Waspi women who have joined us in the public gallery today. Now, the PHSO makes it clear that 1950s born women have faced pension injustice, that they are entitled to compensation, and that Parliament must now identify an appropriate mechanism for redress. As part of the PHSO's report, it was recommended that women born in the 1950s were awarded a level 4 amount of compensation between £1,000 and £2,950, but there is scope for the government to award more in some circumstances. Given how long Waspi women have now waited for redress, a large number have passed away without seeing justice delivered. This is the sharp end of what we mean in the motion when we say that justice delayed is justice denied. It is imperative that the UK government address the concerns raised by the Ombudsman by holding a debate and a vote as soon as possible. The Parliamentary Ombudsman final report is now published, but there is no timeline for the government's compensations proposals. Now, notwithstanding the very generous words of our Tory elected members, it does appear that Tory members have gone into hiding and are trying to kick the can down the road for an incoming Labour government to deal with. For a party that's been in government for 14 years, that's an unforgivable negation of their responsibilities to these women. I'll summarise by saying the PHSO's report contains 3 straightforward conclusions. The DWP failed Waspi women. Waspi women should be compensated, and Parliament should intervene to set up a scheme. Therefore, all MPs must be given time for a debate and an urgent vote so Waspi women can finally put an end to this injustice. I move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ann-Dowling. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, every 13 minutes a Waspi woman dies without justice. As Councillor Ann-Dowling said, that's more than 270,000 women who have died without seeing a penny of the money the Ombudsman now says they were owed. All that pension money filters straight into the coffers of the Treasury. Waspi women have said that Working Pensions Secretary Mel Stride has refused to meet them to discuss compensation, and some 6 weeks after the PHSO report has been published, the government has still not offered any response. So they're definitely in hiding, they're definitely kicking it into the long grass. And while the Conservative amendment was welcome, I think it would be more welcome if they contact their Conservative MPs, their Conservative party, and get them to get the ball moving now, because these women have been waiting a long time, many, many years, for the money that is owed to them, and I would urge them to do that as soon as possible. So really, just to agree with Councillor Ann-Dowling, this money should be paid now. There should be a debate in Parliament now. They've waited long enough, they've waited for justice long enough, so pay them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Michelle Campbell.
Thank you, Provost. Sorry, just to make it a Renfrewshire sort of focus on this, in a previous work position, I worked for Gavin Newlands MP, and a lot of my work was focused around the work for that Ombudsman report and the various stages. And I don't think that people can actually understand the gravity of how stressful that was for the women involved and for the women that were supporting those women that were going through that as well. So to want to dismiss the sort of findings so readily, I find as a complete slap in the face to these women. I congratulate these women on continuing their fight for justice and on our local level for our women that are affected. I say it on a personal level because I've spent hours of my life looking at that, hours well used to look at those reports to try and make a difference. I thank Gavin Newlands MP for the work that he continues to do on this. And all parliamentarians that are coming together on this issue, because it needs to happen now. Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Neil Graham.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep it short. You know, as Councillor Leishman said, the Conservative group are broadly supportive. We're supportive of the SNP motion, and we agree with it. And we're virtually agreeing to more or less everything that the Labour group are saying. I do find it disappointing that the Councillor Ann-Dowling is not accepting it, so that we can get cross-party support in this. And I don't think it's any come down for Councillor Ann-Dowling to accept it, so that we can get cross-party support. And for what Councillor Jacqueline Cameron says, I'm more than happy to speak to Conservative MPs about this and to get more information. And if the MP hasn't met with them, I'm quite happy to write to them as Conservative group leader to ask that they meet the Waspi women and the representatives. And I'm willing to do that. I hope that Councillor Ann-Dowling's happy also to accept our amendment, and we can get cross-party support on this. On what has been a divisive day, and there's a lot of motions coming up, and I think it would be really good if we can all, as a chamber, agree with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Patterson.
Many thanks, Provost. I suppose I think Councillor Ann-Dowling has already said she's not accepting the amendment, and that's a decision I fully endorse in terms of the motion. I think it's an important section to retain in this motion. Now, I suppose sympathies and broadly agreeing are one thing, actions another. Now, there's no, I mean, we're past the point of sympathies, we're actually past. I mean, if there's a Conservative MP that needs to meet these women to understand the issue, what he's been doing the last kind of 10 years, this is a group of women certainly aware of appearing at most party conferences, willing to lobby. As far as I know, they've been apolitical in a sense of willing to meet anybody that can further their cause, and quite rightly so. They've been treated terribly. It's not a feeling of injustice, by the way. It's an actual injustice that these women have suffered. It's not feeling. It's an actual injustice. And is it going to take some kind of ITV star-studded Christmas drama to get this up the agenda where it deserves to be? Because that's what's happened with the post office. We've seen how fast government can act when something is high up in the political agenda. This issue it shouldn't take that for these women to be compensated. It's not just the women have been robbed. The impact on their families, I think, something that's misunderstood. Plans that were made when they get to retirement age to spend more time with grandchildren, to move abroad, to do things, and the carpet was swept out from under them at the last minute. That's simply unfair when you've been planning towards that your whole life. And also, we've made this point in the past, the local economy suffered, because these are women that wouldn't stick this money in some kind of high interest saving account, that have been spending it on living in their communities. So the actual economy has been robbed on a local level with this decision as well. It's simply incomprehensible that we've got the evidence in front of us what happened and the heels are being dragged in compensation. There is no more fact finding, there's no more getting together to discuss. Do the right thing and get on with compensating these women. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. My friend Barbara would happily star in that drama for the telly. Not me, I said Barbara. Okay, Councillor Jennifer Adam.
Thank you, Provost. I would agree with all my colleagues for by the Conservatives, obviously, because this is something, as Jim says, you know, the injustice, we all know the injustice has been done to the women that have lived through this, you know, that were born in the 50s. Starting obviously your Conservative government, it started under John Major, you know, he decided to put it back to 2000, roll it out between 2010 and 2020. And by David Cameron, they pushed it back another 2 years. So that 2 years alone was estimated to serve them 30 billion. So it gives you an indication of what they've actually, what they've taken off of the women that were born in the 50s. So I'm delighted that Alison has accepted our amendment, because they are very, very aligned by the fact that we're asking the Labour Party, once they come into power in the next general election, to sign up to a bill that will absolutely, you know, we're not conceding, but we're not running it down in Westminster. They've got a better chance since SNP are not running in Westminster to take power. But but what we're asking them to do is sign up to the bill, so when they do beat the Conservatives, they will be running this bill to make sure the women get what they deserve, the compensation they so rightly deserve. So well done.
Thanks, Councillor. Caroline Davidson, Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be very brief because Alison has covered all the facts and does everything that Jim Patterson said. I've said that previously in chambers, everything about the local economy, women dying, not getting a pension, you know. So I've been supporting the Waspi women for 7 years now, and I've made a lot of good friends with local Waspi, some of whom are here today. It's time for this Tory government to set a date and compensate these women as defined in the Ombudsman's report, which was 5 years in the making. It's time to end the pension injustice suffered by NHS 50s women. They need to be compensated for their lost years.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Robert Innes.
I won't get into much detail. I echo everything that Councillor Patterson said there. I just wanted to highlight, obviously, I've worked for Mary Black now for almost a decade, and she's been a big voice in the Waspi campaign. I've spent hours, days maybe of my life going through some of this stuff, and it's such an injustice, and it is going to take something like a TV drama that it seems it's actually got to that ridiculous point now. So I don't want to touch it anymore, but well done to the Waspi women that are with us and the ones that aren't with us anymore for keeping this campaign going. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Innes. Councillor Audrey Doig.
I am a Waspi woman. I started work 50 years ago with Marks and Spencer's full time. I've never had a day off of work apart from when I had my son. When I was made aware of this a number of years ago, realising that I would have to work till I'm 66 before I'd be considered for a state pension, I was horrified, because when I started work at age 16, 50 years ago, you were retiring at 60. So not only was I going to have to work another 6 years, I was going to have to contribute to basically not have my pension for 6 years. And that's absolutely ridiculous. And it's not the first time that women have had to stand up to basically get what's basically due to them. Next door to us, Glasgow City Council, basically for years ignored the women who were wanting equal pay that were employees of them. And a certain party ignored them for years and years and years. And it wasn't until the SNP administration came in that they actually compensated the women and got it sorted out. So let's hope all the parties in this area and down in Westminster don't do the same to the Waspi women, and we get our justice and our recompense sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Steele.
This is going to be kind of weak by comparison after Councillor. It's just two very brief points just to broaden it out slightly, and the main point I want to make is this is what always happens. You've got the contaminated blood scandal, you've got minor compensation scandals, you've got the post office scandal, you've got the Waspi scandal. Just as Councillor Jacqueline Cameron said, the plan always seems to be, and I'm sorry if this sounds blunt, drag it out until people are dead, and then you don't have to compensate them. That's the injustice of it as a thing on its own is absolutely clear, but the process by which it has been dragged out just is an insult to injury. It really is, and I think what we need is an extremely strong, unified voice. And Councillor Adam is absolutely correct. you don't need to be a genius to work out it was going to be a Labour government at some point. SNP is not going to take many seats south of the border. See, you're clapping and you're cheering, and I can quite understand why, but the bottom line is you're going to have to pick these up, all of them, which have been kicked into the long grass. That's the reality of what's facing us at the minute. And what we need is councillors, MSPs in Edinburgh in particular, I'm looking at Labour seats, not to be abstaining, but to saying, support this, get it sorted. I don't have the answer how you do that. God knows we have enough financial troubles at a council level. I'm not under any illusions what they're going to get at a UK level, but you cannot, in any sort of civilised society, plan to let people die to sort something out. It's disgusting. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please, Provost. I spoke to the Waspi women at the break there, and I said I was going to, include them in my speech, and I forgot because I veered away. So I just wanted to pay testament to the people I've met and the people I met a few weeks ago, that I'm just absolutely admire your tenacity, your determination, and your courage to keep fighting on and on. I take my hat off to you. I think you're all wonderful. Thank you.
Agree. Councillor Ann-Dowling, do you want to come in and sum up?
Thank you, Provost. It is very heartening today to hear most of the feedback that we've had, and I'm particularly glad that we have had a large degree of political consensus, given that Waspi women live and reside in Renfrewshire look to us for political leadership as elected members are here to see that, and I do thank colleagues who have stuck to the spirit of that consensus today. I'm not going to bite in some of the remarks that some other SNP colleagues have made regarding Labour, and you can believe me, I've got plenty of ammunition to come back with, but I made a promise to myself that I would not allow us to be veered off, if I could help it, into an argy-bargy on this issue, given the sensitivities, and to pay respect to the public gallery today for the Waspi women who have joined us. So I'm going to let sleeping dogs, or doigs, lie, as I should say. I'll leave it at that as a wee pun, and not pick it up. And I do appreciate the efforts that have been made today by Tory elected councillors to reach a cross-party position. But unfortunately, I do agree with some of our other contributions that this issue is not just about getting consensus here in the principle of the issue today. And I do accept that you're making your comments in good faith and that you back the Waspi women's fight for pension justice. I don't dispute that, but it is a fact that it is a Conservative government that are controlling the agenda in Westminster on this issue at the moment, and it is very, very difficult to come to any other conclusion that they are deliberately delaying a decision being taken on how to deliver the recommendations of the Ombudsman. And given the comments that have been made by myself and others today, my colleague Caroline Davidson, that a substantial number of these women have actually passed away now, waiting for this to be resolved, it just can't be held back any longer, and that is why that section of the motion is included. So thank you, and I'm happy to conclude at that point.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ann-Dowling. I'll just finish the debate by also reiterating what you've all said and heaping praise on the women. And the women, obviously, particularly that are here today, because this is our local community, they are our local community. And, they're fighting for their sisters who are not able to fight for themselves, the ones who have passed away and the ones who perhaps have health issues and other things. So I'm going to break with tradition. I'm going to ask the council to give you a round of applause because you're amazing. And quite frankly, I mean, your campaign is going to go down in history. There's no doubt about that. It's probably one of the longest and protracted campaigns, which I hope will end up in success for you. But we are right behind you all the way, and we wish you all the very best. Okay, so we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. It's a roll call vote. We have a motion by Councillor Ann-Dowling, seconded by Councillor Davidson, which has been supplemented by the addition of Councillor Jacqueline Cameron's motion, which was seconded by, amendment, which was seconded by Councillor Annam. We then have an amendment from Councillor Leishman, seconded by Councillor McGonigal. Could members confirm whether they are voting for Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion or Councillor Leishman's amendment? Councillor Adam.
Motion.
Councillor Aileen Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Ann-Dowling.
Motion.
Councillor Burns.
Motion.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Motion.
Provost Cameron.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Clark.
Motion.
Councillor Davidson.
Motion.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Ogie Doig. Councillor Gilmore.
Motion.
Councillor Grady.
Motion.
Councillor Gillian Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Neil Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Councillor Innes.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Motion.
Councillor James McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Mags McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Councillor McGonigal.
Amendment.
Councillor Maguire. Councillor McGurk.
Motion.
Councillor McMillan.
Motion.
Councillor McNaughton.
Motion.
Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Mullen.
Motion.
Councillor Milet.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Roden.
Motion.
Councillor Shaw.
Motion.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Steele.
Motion.
Councillor Hannigan has voted for the motion. I have 38 for the motion, 5 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, well done. Okay, that brings us on to item 11, which is motion 5 by Councillors Ann-Dowling and Gillian Graham, and I am merging that with motion 13 by Councillors Leishman and Neil Graham. Councillor Ann-Dowling.
Thank you, Provost. This motion today asks that the recommendations of the CAS review are implemented in Scotland and that education materials that are non-CAS compliant, such as the promotion of social transitioning without clinical oversight, be withdrawn from all education policy and practice in our schools. The landmark CAS review is a report into gender identity services for young people in NHS England and looks at how the NHS should deal with children and young people experiencing distress or discomfort in relation to being male or female. Its author, Dr. Hilary Cass, found gender medicine to be operating on shaky foundations when it came to the evidence for medical treatment like prescribing hormones to pause puberty for gender dysphoria or to transition to the opposite sex. Now, while Cass focused on the gender identity services delivered by the Tavistock Clinic in England, it is accepted that the Sandiford Clinic, Gender Clinic in Glasgow operates under a near identical model. Indeed, subsequently, Scotland's NHS has announced it has paused prescribing puberty blockers to children referred by the Sandiford Gender Clinic. All political parties in the Scottish Parliament, with the exception of the increasingly extremist Green Party, have accepted the clinical validity of the CAS review. This includes statements of confirmation by Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, which is a welcome development. Why did the CAS report happen? It happened because the UK government commissioned it after clinicians, parents and a broader group of women and gay rights campaigners worked for years to raise concerns about what was happening to children and young people. The CAS review is clear. Children have been harmed by unevidenced gender medicine. The report found that 80 to 90% of the young patients at the Tavistock were same-sex attracted, and a substantial number were autistic. The CAS review is a reality check. Questions must now be asked why children are now saying in large numbers they have the wrong body, an idea that is uncritically promoted within schools. The CAS review is clear that treatment and education should be on the basis of proven evidence and expert guidance, not on ideological lobbying and institutional capture. It's been called the paediatric medical scandal of the century, with harrowing testimony of the struggles of detransitioning young people and follow-up reports such as the story covered in last week's Sunday Post, exposing the harmful consequences of social transitioning of some children without appropriate clinical oversight, which CAS highlights as a risk. The Sunday Post reported that Catherine is a girl who suffered horrific sexual abuse at age 5, who was encouraged by social workers to believe she was born in the wrong body, rather than see her behavioural and psychological distress as a cry for help for the trauma she had suffered. Catherine revealed the struggles over her body once she began puberty, saw her being given tight binders to prevent her breast showing, and her name and pronouns were changed. Catherine said, "I was only hours away from starting the process that would have led to me getting the powerful male hormone testosterone after being referred by the Sandiford Gender Clinic in Glasgow. I was told I'd be happy if I changed gender. School and my social worker made it sound so easy. I'd simply been born in the wrong body," they said. "If I hadn't broken the spell on the actual day I was supposed to keep that medical appointment, I would have been given drugs that would have changed my life forever, causing irreversible harm, leaving me infertile and at risk of cancer. I could be sitting here today with a massive scar where my breasts should be." The Scottish Government must look at how gender ideology has influenced the education system through the resources of unregulated organisations teaching children that if they don't fit in with gender stereotypes, then they may have been born in the wrong body.
Alison, I'm just reminding you of the time.
Thank you. I'm beginning to sum. Thanks, Provost. What is needed is regulated, high-quality, inclusive education with trained teachers and an evidence-based curriculum with access to social and mental health support for children. Schools have a duty of political impartiality. They shouldn't be teaching contested, unevidenced, anti-science beliefs as fact. The lack of leadership from the Scottish Government has been woeful. The interim findings of the CAS review have been known for 2 years, so they can't say they didn't know what was coming in the final report. The Scottish Government has a responsibility to take leadership, particularly in their health and education policy areas. To finish, failure to implement the CAS recommendations will let clinical staff and a generation of young people down. It's time to return to fully evidence-based healthcare and education and the primacy of safeguarding principles. I move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ann-Dowling. Councillor Davidson? Oh no, it's not. Gillian. Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'll keep this quick. I formally second the motion. I think what I'd like to add is that, we use science nationally and internationally to shape and drive forward national policies such as climate change. The same must apply for the standards of care and welfare for our young people. Puberty is often a confusing time for young people, particularly in regards changes to their bodies, sexual awareness and their identity. Our young people need more support. more evidence support in its many forms when considering life-changing decisions. The CAS review findings are clear and definitive. We must learn from these, follow the science and put child welfare at the centre of health and of education gender identity policies. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you. Okay, before I bring in the Conservative member, I have been notified there's an amendment, and I think Carol has sent it to everyone. The amendment is from Councillor Hughes. Yeah. Okay, so I'll bring in Councillor Leishman first, and then I'll bring you in for your amendment.
Thank you, Provost. With respect, I don't know what to add. I really think Councillors Ann-Dowling and Gillian Graham covered virtually everything that I was going to say. So I can be really quick on this and more or less say that the motion I presented speaks for itself. I did speak very, very passionately about this 15 months ago, so I'm sure people remember my position, and this is clear. I think the CAS report has vindicated a lot of what people like the LGB Alliance and women's rights organisations were saying, that medicine had been captured by ideology, which really should never happen. Medicine should always be independent of ideology and should be evidence-based. So when you see or read a news article about like the CAS report, you do have mixed emotions. First of all, you have relief that common sense has finally prevailed, and then you have sadness and anger about the number of people that have been actually let down by that continuing practice. I have studied and read widely on this, and it is actually quite appalling to read what was actually going on in the Tavistock. There were jokes about transing the gay away. That is absolutely awful. There was jokes that if at this rate in 20 years there'll be no gay people left. That's horrible. Councillors Ann-Dowling and Gillian Graham can speak a lot more eloquently about the effect this has had on women's rights. But as you know, I am a very glad, proud, unembarrassed gay man, and I have solidarity with my gay brothers and sisters around the world. But I also know that for young persons, coming to terms with your sexual identity can be difficult, and to have medical practitioners pushing the ideology onto vulnerable persons that are actually going through the most confusing time, one of the most confusing times of their life, I think was absolutely shocking. But I think I just want to applaud Councillors Ann-Dowling and Gillian Graham. They spoke very well on their motion as well. So that's me. That's me.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Councillor Neil Graham.
Second and reserve right to come back in, thanks.
Okay, I'll ask Councillor Lisa Marie Hughes to speak to her amendment.
Thanks, Provost. The amendment is fairly self-explanatory. It notes the publication and recommendations, the review and the decisions of the clinicians at Sandyford Clinic to pause the prescription of puberty blockers.
Councillor, can I get you to put your mic down a wee bit?
Sorry. And states that Council should agree that the findings of the CAS review should be considered by the Scottish Government, and that it's important that that includes the Scottish context and clinical expertise, and ask the Chief Executive to write to the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care, requesting a timeline for consideration and reporting to the local authority health boards. The reason I have put this forward is that if I take, I have issues with the language around the Conservative motion. I have to say, I think there will be a lot of trans, non-binary and gender questioning young people who might find it deeply uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like they're there, and this is about people. And actually, Councillor Leishman, I will say you referred to people when you were talking and you've elaborated in that bit, so I appreciate that. But we're talking about something clinical, but the motion feels clinical and feels a bit like the people aren't there, and there will be a number of gender questioning and trans young people who might have been waiting for a treatment who now won't have it, and that's a big issue for people, and I just felt that there should be a bit of levity there. And if I take Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion, in good faith, she is looking for resolutions for things that potentially are issues and looking for science and clinical expertise to be important. And that is, of course, important. The thing for me is that it jumps the gun a wee bit, Alison, if I may say. The Scottish Government and NHS Scotland need to consider this within the Scottish context. Some of the services that Dr. Cass talked about were around things like more holistic services, counselling, additional support, things like that. Some of those things are in place here. We need to understand what we have, and we need to understand it nationally, not just in relation to the Sandyford, because there will be elements of this everywhere. And if we are looking at reviewing educational detail from any of that, we should look at it understanding what the spectrum of things is in Scotland as well. I think that's really important. Clearly, it needs to be looked at. It is an enormous piece of work taking into lots of things, but it doesn't take into consideration the Scottish context. It is really only looked at England and Wales, and the context can be different for different populations. And scientifically, it's also important that we take those things into consideration. And lots of people are affected by treatment in lots of different ways. And I suppose I would just want to say that for the young trans, non-binary or gender questioning people who may come to find that their assigned gender is their gender, we need to get the support right for them, and we should all want to make sure that's done, like whatever that support comes to be. And I just think we need to be careful about jumping in and doing lots of things without ensuring that the context is right for it. In the same way that if you do things too quickly, it can be colleagues here have said that things have been done too quickly and without evidence, and that has been harmful. It can also be harmful if we instigate doing things too quickly. We need to make sure we're careful about this.
Thank you, Councillor. Who's your seconder?
It's Councillor Innes.
Councillor Innes, do you want to speak just now?
Yeah, I second Councillor Hughes and reserve my right to come in, Provost.
Okay. Councillor Ann-Dowling, do you want to come in and let us know if you're accepting the amendment or not?
Thanks, Provost. I'm only speaking to my motion. So
Yes.
there were two motions
Yes.
referenced there. So just to be clear, this
Yes.
is on the Labour motion. I don't accept the amendment, and the reasons for not accepting my amendment are very clear. Firstly, Scottish Government has had 2 years since the interim results of the CAS report was published. They knew it was coming, and they've had 2 years to consider those very clear interim results. To then say, we can't rush now, we need to look at it. Children are being harmed. If that was in any other area of medicine and a report of CAS's quality and conclusions were published, those practices would be stopped on a dime. So I don't accept that at all. I also can't accept, unfortunately, if you had not put in the statement about delete all the motion and add, I could have taken your amendment as an addition against the motion that we have. But what I will under no circumstances accept is an amendment that removes the paragraph that Renfrewshire Council will write to Education Scotland recommended that they instruct all non-CAS compliant school guidance be withdrawn. If we are all accepting the science from this world-leading expert and her team that took 4 years to produce this report, then why would we allow non-CAS compliant materials to continue to be used in schools? All that paragraph is asking the motion that we write to the Education Secretary to review it. If it's CAS compliant, then the guidance stays. So I can't accept that. I'm quite happy if you want to reflect to take our motion and add yours. I'll come back to that if that's something you'd want to look at. But the reason that we are pushing forward with the need for evidence in both the health and education settings is because CAS has been clear that social transitioning for some children, and I take your points, Lisa Marie, I don't dispute some of the points you raised about other children, but for some children, that's extremely harmful. And it's happening in our schools without clinical input or oversight. Now, I'll very briefly allude to this, and I thank you for your indulgence, Provost. I am only speaking to our motion, but because you kind of conflated some of the other emotion in this as well. The Labour motion does not reject the CAS findings that quite clearly also states that some gender questioning children or young people rather, it is the best path for them to go down and look at medical or potentially surgical interventions. That is the best clinical outcome for their gender dysphoria, and we acknowledge that. So this is not about pitting groups of young children against or try to put them all together, rather. I'll rephrase that because I don't want to imply that that's what you said, but putting them all together, we acknowledge that there is a great deal of diversity here and that all needs to be respected and managed sensitively. But on the basis of this motion, how anyone could vote against asking our parliamentarians, our lawmakers to review education policy to make sure it's CAS compliant, I find that difficult to accept. So again, I extend my invitation to my colleague to allow our motion to stand as is and add your motion to it. And I think we would all be happy to move forward on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Lisa Marie Hughes. Okay, Councillor Michelle Campbell.
Thank you very much, Provost. It's quite refreshing that this actually has taken a mature turn in terms of the conversation. That is not a slant at anyone in this chamber. I mean, in terms of the bigger way that this topic is now being addressed through. I trust in some of the comments that people have different viewpoints, and I respect that completely. But I support my colleague Councillor Hughes' amendment because of the very important niche point of that. I think that in the bigger picture of this national conversation, it's been lost by some extremes on both sides, to make that clear. Really trying to feast on it to make sure that they're the only voices that are heard. We're in the middle of that, there will be genuine concern, and that includes individuals who are most affected. It's less than 0.1% of the population, and that's adults. I know we're talking about the children in this aspect, so it's going to be an even smaller population. So I think that language, that my main point is that language is very important, and even in some of our discussions today, we're making assumptions in some of the way that we're talking about this, and that is concerning. Healthcare has shifted from medicalised model for a reason over the decades. And medical model, when you're talking about very specific aspects, yes, it should be the predominant part of the conversation, but you can't do one without the other. You can't talk about physical health without talking about mental health. We all have a physical health. We all have a mental health. It's a tangential subject that way. And I know through my whole time in mental health nursing, I always have fought for mental health to be seen on an even keel and par as physical health, not just through politics, but through society at large. It doesn't matter if you change policy, change legislation, it requires societal change to accept that. And when it comes to looking at budgets and where things are difficult, physical services will always get that money first, and it will always be mental health services that will be second rate. That is my experience, that is my personal opinion, because I've worked in the NHS long enough to see it, and I will always fight that point that in language and nuance, if we're looking at making sure our services are fit for purpose for all the reasons and across all the different viewpoints that have been expressed today, I think it's really, really important that we have to make sure that it delivers for modernised healthcare needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I'm going to have Mark come in and just clarify where we are.
Yep.
Motion wise and amendment.
Thank you, Provost. So at the moment we have motion item number 11, motion 5, and item number 19, motion 13, and an amendment. I appreciate Councillor Davidson, given that her motion is Councillor Ann-Dowling, given that her motion appears on the agenda first, will be taken as the motion, and she's clarified the position in relation to the SNP amendment. I'm not sure you've passed comment on the Conservative motion.
No, I wait. You're taking that motion separately, so I'll wait.
No, Provost, and
Oh, the amendment, excuse me.
that-
No,
that-
I'm not accepting it, sorry. And I'll clarify that when we
Thank you.
get to it.
Right,
Can you
on-
check, I can sum up though as well, because I haven't summed up as the mover. I spoke to the amendment, I haven't summed up.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you, Provost. I will be very brief. I just want to reiterate that the CAS review is clear that treatment and education should be on the basis of proven evidence and expert guidance. That what we have discussed today has been widely referred to as the paediatric medical scandal of the century. That does not negate the fact that children who have a trans identity, who are currently going through treatment and who may, as young adults in the future, go through treatment, don't need and deserve evidenced treatment that will meet their needs. But the CAS review is clear that within education and other areas, there is no clinical input, and that is causing direct harm to our young people. And I think I would reach out in very good faith to everyone in this chamber today before the vote takes place. Parents in Renfrewshire will be watching this debate. They'll be following it online. They'll be reading about it on social media. And I know from speaking to a lot of parents in this issue that many will be dismayed if we are not at the very least asking our representatives in Holyrood to go back and look at these materials to ensure in our schools are CAS compliant. That's all this motion is saying. It's not asking you to take a side, it's just, is it CAS compliant? And if we all accept the CAS report in full, that clearly points out there are problems here across the board, generally speaking. I think it would be in good faith to vote for it. But I take everyone's comments on board today, but that's our view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ann-Dowling. Can you all check your phones, please? Somebody's phone keeps buzzing or pinging and it's kind of annoying me. It seems to be coming from over this side somewhere. Okay, I'll bring in Gillian Graham and then I will bring in Councillor Leishman to sum up in his motion. Okay, Councillor Gillian Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm not totally clear, Councillor Campbell, you're talking about the niche and nuance about the amendment. I think you were referring to mental health. When I was seconding this amendment, I talked about supports in their many forms, and I quite agree. I don't see physical support. I see physical support and mental health support for young people is absolutely vital. I think, you know, everybody here, or most people here know that I'm an openly gay woman and I've been openly gay for 40 years, and coming out in the 80s was not the easiest at times, I have to say. So I have walked a mile in these young people's shoes. I've been, I know what it's like, and know how it is to go through this and the confusion and the support that you need. I've also been a teacher when Clause 28 was around and had young people come to me asking for help, and I wasn't allowed to tell them that if you're gay, bisexual, LGBT, you're okay. You're perfectly normal. You're not a broken human being. So when I've put this together, this motion, and supported Councillor Ann-Dowling, I do it from a point of view of having been there, having that lived experience. And I believe that our schools need support, they need guidance. We're asking for a pause, stop, check if it's compliant, and then move on. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Leishman.
Thank you, Provost. To be honest, I don't have anything to add. I think my motion speaks for itself. I've made my position quite clear on it, and I'd still like to present my motion unamended.
Okay.
Thank you, Provost. We have a roll call vote. There will be 2 votes. So the first vote will be on Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion, seconded by Councillor Gillian Graham, and that takes Councillor Leishman's motion and Councillor Neil Graham, which was seconded by Councillor Neil Graham, as the amendment. So can members confirm whether they are voting for Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion or Councillor Leishman's amendment? Councillor Adam.
Abstain.
Councillor Airlie Nicholson.
Abstain.
Councillor Ann-Dowling.
Motion.
Councillor Burns. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Abstain.
Provost Cameron.
Abstain.
Councillor Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor Clark.
Motion.
Councillor Davidson.
Motion.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Doig.
Abstain.
Councillor Gilmer.
Motion.
Councillor Grady.
Motion.
Councillor Gillian Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Neil Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Abstain.
Councillor Innes.
Abstain.
Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Abstain.
Councillor James McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Abstain.
Councillor Mags McLaren.
Abstain.
Councillor McCulloch. Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Councillor McGonigal.
Amendment.
Councillor Maguire. Councillor McGurk.
Abstain.
Councillor McMillan.
Motion.
Councillor McNaughton.
Abstain.
Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Mullen.
Motion.
Councillor Mylett.
Abstain.
Councillor Nicholson.
Abstain.
Councillor Patterson.
Abstain.
Councillor Roden.
Abstain.
Councillor Shaw.
Abstain.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Steele.
Abstain.
Councillor Hammond. Councillor Hannigan has voted for the motion. If you just bear with me a second. I have 17 for the motion, 5 for the amendment, 21 abstentions. So the motion proceeds to the next round of voting.
The big elections.
Thank you, members. So the next vote is between Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion, seconded by Councillor Gillian Graham, and that is against Councillor Hughes' amendment, seconded by Councillor Innes. Could members confirm whether they are voting for Councillor Ann-Dowling's motion or Councillor Hughes' amendment? Councillor Adam.
Amendment.
Councillor Airlie Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Ann-Dowling.
Motion.
Councillor Burns.
Amendment.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Amendment.
Provost Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Clark.
Motion.
Councillor Davidson.
Motion.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Doig.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilmer.
Motion.
Councillor Grady.
Motion.
Councillor Gillian Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Neil Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Motion.
Councillor Hoods.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Amendment.
Councillor Innes.
Amendment.
Councillor Leishman.
Motion.
Councillor McFarlane.
Amendment.
Councillor James McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Kenny McLaren,
Amendment.
Councillor Mags McLaren,
Amendment.
Councillor McCulloch,
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald,
Motion.
Councillor McEwen,
Amendment.
Councillor McGonigal,
Motion.
Councillor Maguire, Councillor McGurk,
Amendment.
Councillor McMillan,
Motion.
Councillor McNaughton,
Amendment.
Councillor Montgomery, Councillor Mullen,
Motion.
Councillor Milet,
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson,
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson, Councillor Rodden,
Amendment.
Councillor Shaw,
Amendment.
Councillor Smith,
Motion.
Councillor Steele, and Councillor Hannigan has voted for the motion. We have 22 for the motion, 21 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, so that brings us on to motion, just before we discuss motion 7, it's my intention to try and just plough through the business if everyone's okay with that, unless anyone's otherwise minded. But if we get to 1 o'clock, we'll see how we go. If we've still got a few motions to debate, then I'll take a 15-minute break at 1 o'clock, or as close to that as possible. Okay, and then we'll come back and finish. So motion 7, Councillors Graham and Smith. Councillor Gillian Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just going into my notes. I had the opportunity recently to take part in Heart Start training and learn firsthand about the vital skills involved in CPR, and they're virtually life-changing. Our motion is that teaching all children, all young people what to do in emergency, how to perform CPR and instruct an adult what to do has been shown to dramatically increase survival rates from cardiac arrest. Renfrewshire Council believes that this is a life skill that every young person should have and instructs officers to liaise with Save a Life for Scotland to roll out delivery of a Heart Start programme across all Renfrewshire schools starting in the next academic year. Now, I've spoken to the Education Service and I understand that the CPR training does take place in some schools, but not in all. But I believe it is a life skill that every young person should have. Now, it's not for us as elected members to determine what age this should take place, and I appreciate that in secondary schools, the timetables and exams may make it difficult to schedule other than in maybe 6th year. But imagine if all our P7 Renfrewshire pupils graduated primary able to save a life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Your seconder is Councillor Ben Smith.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'll just make my comments just now because I hope this won't be a contentious item. There's around 60,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests every year in the UK, and many of those people will be parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. So the Councillor Graham's idea of training children in Renfrewshire to be able to perform the Heart Start motion may well save many lives in the future. So I think it's a great idea. I thank Councillor Graham for introducing it. I'm very happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I don't know if councillors are aware, or perhaps some don't remember, but we did pass a motion in the previous term of the council allowing the Heart Start training to be carried out in our schools. Councillor Jim Patterson, I'm glad to see it on the agenda again, though.
Yeah, you're right, Provost. I think we did. The British Heart Foundation had a campaign in 2017-18, I think, if my memory serves, on this issue, and we did sign up to it then. I think it was a motion from then Councillor McCartan, if I remember loosely. But no, we signed up to it. I appreciate, and I no issue with agreeing this today, by the way, to reaffirm the commitment and maybe get a bit of uniformity in how it's been delivered in schools seems to make sense, because I think there was uniformity at one stage, and then I think when the schools kind of broke up and home learning became commonplace for a year, I think since we've re-established in person learning that maybe this has fallen down the agenda a bit for all sorts of reasons, and that's not a criticism. And the head teachers or senior school staff have got enough on their plate without us adding to it. But I think this is important. I do remember it was off the back of a young girl in Erskine who saved a man's life by performing CPR. I think her name was Abby. Again, forgive me if that's wrong, but several years ago. And I think that's kind of what brought it to the local attention, that she had the skills to save. I would point out as well that since we agreed that motion, there is now defibrillators at every Renfrewshire school as part of an investment that was made a few years back, and I know that's been largely welcomed, and that's only going to add to it. It's only right that the kids know how to use them and maybe demystify these machines that are kind of stuck up at their school gates. I always say, a vested interest in this. It's probably for the best that we have our children trained in this, because given my genealogy west of Scotland and a certain lifestyle that I lead, it probably needs to be a heart attack waiting to happen. So having the Waynes at home fully trained in CPR probably wouldn't be the worst thing as a trotter out Renfrew. So no, I'm fully in support of this, and thanks for bringing it back. And no problem, there'll be a bit of uniformity in how we deliver this across the schools if the officers can draw that together for us.
Yeah, I think that the previous motion was in 2019, and it was actually Councillor McCartan and Councillor Andy Doig that brought the motion. I was particularly pleased to see it then. I do remember that I mentioned that we had lost my dad when he was only 56 years old. You would never have looked at him and thought he was a candidate for a heart attack. He was skinny, walked everywhere, was super fit, and yet it happened. So yeah, I mean, we can never discuss this too much as far as I'm concerned. Okay, well, I don't think there's any amendments. No? Oh, Councillor Mullen, sorry.
I think Councillor Doig's before me, Provost. Is she not?
Is he? Oh, Councillor Doig.
Hi there. Being a person that's been qualified to do CPR for over 30 years, I do welcome this coming up again, but it has come up before. And I have personally myself been into high schools and primary schools in my area to teach this to children. I've also taught it to groups of over 60s and senior groups in different areas. One of the things that I would like to see added to this is Councillor Patterson has said we have defibs in every school, so there's defibs in every area in Renfrewshire, but there's lots of places that have defibs attached to them as well. You can't work a defib unless you know how to do CPR. Basically, that's how you save lives. So teaching that to our primary 6 and primary 7s is a fantastic idea. And as Jim says, the West of Scotland has one of the worst rates for men having heart attacks, as I know. This week has been unbelievable for my husband and I regarding that. But what I would say is not only support to make sure that our primary 6 and primary 7s get a chance to this. I know it goes on in high schools as well, maybe in specialised afternoon training, etc. But I would also say it doesn't need to be Heart Start programme that does it. Every leisure attendant that works in a swimming pool knows how to do this. And within their staff, there are trainers who train this every week. So we don't have to go too far to look out to get this competent and grateful staff would basically do it. We did it in the past from Renfrewshire Leisure. I'm sure One Ren would do it as well. We'd provide to every school people that know how to do this and would do it willingly for nothing, and it wouldn't cost them anything either. So that's just my comment on that, as in use your local people, get a list in your area where all your defibs are, because there's quite a lot of them about, and maybe get that advertised within local papers and local magazines. This is where your defibs are in your area, because they come in very handy. But again, 6 and 7 primary schools classes would be ideal for getting this on board. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that there's quite a lot to consider during this discussion, different aspects. I mean, I personally don't know. It's a question that I have about perhaps the physical capability of a primary school child to carry out resuscitation I don't know whether, you know, when they're little, if they're really little, is it possible for them to do it? I'm not a medical expert, so I would perhaps like to get some information. If somebody could seek that information for me, I would be really interested in knowing. But even if a child wasn't physically able to do resuscitation, perhaps we just teach them about like what they do in an emergency situation, like what information that they should be retaining to call for help, things like that. So yeah, if somebody could get some expert information for me, I would be grateful. I'm sure other people have thought the same thing at some point. Councillor Mullen.
Thanks, Provost. It's just probably in line with Councillor Doig. Past job with the ambulance service. Many years after we left, we get the opportunity to become Heart Start instructors and moving out into our communities. And the thing about it, Councillor Doig's kind of reflected, DFIBs weren't about then, but DFIBs is a great tool nowadays, there's no doubt about it, but there's not enough of them in the relevant places where they're needed. But in saying that, it can work, it can save lives, and we've met people that we taught and they still remember CPR, which is quite amazing. But it is a lifesaver in the right hands, but it is graft, there's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? But you talk about primary kids, we taught primary sixes and they coped quite well, but it was just the effort and the strength that just needed a wee bit, but they knew what to do and they were talking about their grannies and their granddads, you know the way it goes. But I can't praise this enough. And as I say, me and my wife are proud to get into our communities and train people to do this. So thanks for that, Provost.
Good. Councillor Grady.
Thank you, Provost. As a former instructor in the Army Cadet Force, it was compulsory training for the cadets to go through first aid and Heart Start training. And I know of many of my former cadets who have drawn upon those skills and have saved lives. It's not only just having the knowledge to carry out those actions, it's having the confidence to do it as well. And I think as many young people as possible who know these skills, the better. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Gillian Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just picking up what we've said, apologies if it's been on before a few years ago. I obviously wasn't aware of that, but I did check beforehand. I thought about, you know, you sometimes had these ideas and think, oh, it'll be good, and then you find out it's already happening. So it does, as Councillor Patton was saying, it does seem to be happening in some schools, but not in all schools. And as Councillor Doig said, there's DFIBs in every school, so wouldn't it make sense that the young people can use them? And as Councillor Mullen said, it's a skill that you never forget. You've done it once, you'll never forget it. It's always good to have a refresher. I've been checking and it's from 10 years upwards. That's Provost, you were asking about that. From year 10, so there was a primary 6, isn't it? Primary 5, primary 6. And I suppose I was thinking it's one of these things that if we made it, if it was feasible to make it as part of their graduation from primary school, that every child who leaves primary school has that skill, then every year we're providing that skill to eventually every child below primary 7 will have that skill to be able to perform CPR either in the community or in the school itself. And you're quite right. I mean, this Heart Start is not the only programme out there. I picked Save Life Scotland because it's free, but there may be other options. So it's not prescriptive here. It's more about the principle.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. You know, we can always make services better, and there's no doubt about it. Councillor Davidson.
Excuse me, thanks, Provost. Yeah, I've got a Heart Start myself and I've had to use it. But what your point about children maybe being too small, because primary 6 and 7 vary tremendously in size, but it's not only adults that have heart attacks. It could, a small child could save the life of a younger child. I just didn't know about the physical strength required. I've never actually carried out resuscitation and I'm not trained to do so. So I just wondered about how strong you had to be, you know. I could come back.
Sure.
Just as very recently, just a couple of years ago, also did first aid, specific first aid for children. So it could be something that's included, you know, in the Heart Start thing, whatever, is how to perform, because it's a totally different process to do it to a child or CPR in an adult. So it's something that could.
Okay. Thanks, Caroline. Councillor Rodden.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I thank Councillor Graham and Councillor Smith for bringing this issue to the forefront yet again. I think it's a very valuable skill to have, and having a number of years ago gone through a refresh of first aid training and then having a conversation with my children about what to do in an emergency, I was very thankful at that point that we hadn't had a medical emergency that would require them to step in, because their knowledge was pretty woeful, to be honest. So I think for any young person, it's a very valuable skill for anyone at all, but particularly for young people, it is a very valuable skill to have. And I'm happy to have conversations with Councillor Graham, Councillor Smith, Janie and the interim heads of education to find out where the gaps are and see about plugging them in the best way possible to make sure that every young person in Renfrewshire has the opportunity to learn this life-saving skill.
Thank you, Councillor Rodden. And thanks all for your contributions. I think, there's no objections. So I think everyone unanimously approves your motion, Councillors Graham and Councillor Smith. The motion's accepted. Motion 8 is Councillor McEwen and Councillor Audrey Doig. Councillor McEwen, do we have any amendments? 2 amendments. We have 2 amendments, and I'll get Carol to send them to you just now. I'll give you a couple of minutes so that you can read the amendments, okay? Okay, do people have the amendments? Does everybody have them? Have the opportunity to read them? I think some people have left the chamber. Yeah, well, we can just start the debate without them. It's their fault they're missing it. Kathy? Or maybe they have. I don't know. Kathy?
I'm not going to accept any of the amendments. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Okay, so can I now speak to the motion? Okay. The motion is simply asking that previous decisions made by Renfrewshire Council regarding Trident are still upheld. What decisions were they? Well, let's look at them. The 30th of April 2015, motion put forward by the SNP, Renfrewshire Council believes that weapons of mass destruction have no place in a modern civilised society. Now, at this time, Labour stated in an amendment that every level of government should be building support for nuclear disarmament, as the existence of a nuclear terror threatens the whole planet. The amendment was carried. No problem with that. 15th of December 2015, Renfrewshire Council welcomes the vote in the Scottish Parliament taken on the 3rd of November 2015, which called on the UK government not to renew Trident. This was agreed unanimously. Well done. Agreed unanimously. 13th of December 2018, Renfrewshire Council is committed to the long-term goal of a world without nuclear weapons. renouncing the option of using nuclear weapons first, then cancelling the plans to entire nuclear arsenal with enhanced weapons. No more renewals. Actively pursuing agreement among nuclear armed states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals by supporting the treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons. This motion was carried. Again, well done. 9th of May 2019, motion was referred back to the full council because of the decision taken on December 2018, which stated that council is a member of the Mayors for Peace, the global international body of councillors working for over 3 decades to promote nuclear disarmament and a more peaceful world. Council passed this motion and it called on the UK government to cancel Trident replacement plans and support the 2017 treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Also, any investments in nuclear weapons producers are at odds with the council's support to the TPNW and council's opposition to Trident renewal. This motion was carried. Now, the motion that I've got here is calling on both the Labour and the Tory party to withdraw their support for Trident being the bedrock of any UK defence policy. And I'm hoping today the message from Renfrewshire Council, from Labour, is exactly that. Why any serving politician would agree with a continued expanding nuclear programme, to me, is simply baffling. And I see it simply as career politicians using this for their own ends. And I do have to say here that Labour in Westminster are not even mildly embarrassed to support the Tories' renewal plans for Trident. And I hope we do send the message out today that that's not the case in Renfrewshire Council. We want rid of Trident. As far as Trident being an independent nuclear deterrent, because that's what the Tories are going to tell you, what has to be taken into consideration is that the UK government rent Trident missiles from America at huge costs, as refit costs are covered by America under a service level agreement that was made in 1958. And again, they'll be renewing it in 2024, this year. I fully expect that I'll be told.
Just reminding you of your time, you would 5 minutes.
Yes, okay. And I fully expect now that I'll be told that despite this, Trident is totally an independent weapon for UK use only. Operational independence. While some argue that Trident is operationally independent, British nuclear deterrent, the reality is more complex, as the close collaboration with the US in terms of technology and maintenance raises questions about true independence. So despite operational independence, the UK's relationship with the US in terms of defence is undeniably intricate. Although Britain has the technical capacity to launch Trident without Americans' consent, the political likelihood of this happening is another matter. A recent report, and this is important, by the Defence Select Committee emphasised the unlikelihood of Trident's use for any purpose other than to give legitimacy to a US nuclear attack by participating in it. Yes, the serving Prime Minister can allow Trident to be used, but let's not be under any illusion here that will be after discussion with America first. So Trident, no matter what way you look at it, is simply a token of support for an American nuclear response, which would leave not only Scotland, but the whole of the UK a target to nuclear exchange. And I'm just finishing, Provost.
Thank you.
As already stated, Yes, Renfrewshire has already, as I've said, expressed the view over and over that it wants no part in an expansion of a Trident nuclear programme. We have and will continue to make our views known to that effect. The message that Renfrewshire wants to once again point out is there should be no weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, which would lead to Renfrewshire and Central Scotland being a first strike target in any warfare. And I am finishing. Yes, and I cannot be any clearer. We in Renfrewshire want to again send out the message that we oppose Trident renewal and that we in Renfrewshire, Scotland, will not merely stand aside and watch Trident on our shores be any part of the United States defence policy. So come on, yes, stand up and be counted here today. Support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Audrey Doig.
I'll second, but reserve for the right to come back in later on in the debate.
Okay, taking us to the amendments. Councillor Leishman, this is the first amendment. Do you want to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Provost. Sorry, you caught me a little
Just
bit.
confirm your seconder.
Oh, sorry, my seconder is Councillor McGonigal.
Councillor McGonigal, thank
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Provost. Sorry, you caught me a little bit by surprise there. I understood perfectly what Councillors McEwen and Audrey Doig were saying in their motion, but I really did get quite baffled when Councillor McEwen started speaking on it, because she seemed to make spoken claims that even contradicted what she claimed written. She writes that the UK's nuclear deterrent is not independent, but then she just acknowledged that it is. It can only be launched or negated or overridden by the British Prime Minister. That's actually in British statute, and it is not dependent on either American consent or approval. So that is just factually incorrect. I mean, I'm actually really surprised Councillor Audrey Doig is seconding this, because Audrey Doig is very, very particular about correcting us on our factual accuracy. And it's not factually accurate that our nuclear arsenal is at the command and control of the United States. That's just not the case. It is our nuclear deterrent, and only the UK government can decide whether to use or not use it. So it just baffled me. Councillor McEwen did predict that we would say that, but that's because it is factual. So that absolutely, she did lose me there, really. I also feel that, yes, of course, the UK will consult with its allies before launching any sort of attack. That's only right and proper. But it wouldn't just be the United States that the UK would consult with. It would be the other members of the Five Eyes. It would be with France and Germany and other political allies around the world. That's the right thing to do. You really don't want to do something quite so drastic without consulting with your allies, the people that are actually on your side and the people whose side that you're on. I also would like to hope that other of our allies would not launch drastic or very heavy-handed attacks without consulting the UK government on it as well. That is the nature of alliance and international cooperation. Of course, yes, I don't see why that's such a big deal, or we'd have to speak to America first. Well, we don't have to, but we would, because that is the right thing to do. We'd also speak to Paris, we'd also speak to Berlin and other countries as well before doing it. But of course, there's never really been any threat of Britain doing this anyway. It's Trident's primary purpose is as a deterrent, and secondarily as to be used only in retaliation. Now, I actually do think that the instinct for disarmament and pacifism are laudable. I just don't think they're realistic because they only work if everybody signs up to it. And there are a lot of bad actors in the world right now. There's some despots in Beijing, Tehran, Moscow who are absolutely not even considering, not even debating abolishing their nuclear arsenal. As a matter of fact, they're stockpiling it, they're expanding on it, and I have no doubt that some of them may even be prepared to use them. The only country I can think of that in good faith ever get rid of its own nuclear arsenal was Ukraine. And they did that to appease their neighbour, Russia. Well, the rest is history. Actually, it's not history, it's ongoing. So there's an example of where getting rid of your nuclear arsenal is not seen by our enemies as an act of good faith. It's seen as an act of weakness. But yeah, I'm just actually rather baffled why we can actually be, sorry, our government can be condemned for having allies, consulting with them and negotiating with them. But yeah, it's quite clear the world is a volatile place right now. I think we're all a bit more nervous than we have been in recent years. I'm of a generation that grew up quite frightened by the prospect of nuclear war. Absolutely, it's horrible. But the only way of deterring it is to actually display that you can retaliate in kind. So yeah, the Conservative group supports the renewal of Trident. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith. Oh, sorry, your seconder. Councillor McGonigal.
Yeah, second and reserve the right, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thanks very much, Provost. I do take on board your comment on a previous motion about councillors being able to raise motions on whatever subject they please. But when I read this motion, I was thinking similarly to Councillor Neil Graham, that we weren't elected on our foreign policy issues, and Councillor Devine referenced so-called sleepy Joe Biden. But I'm sure President Biden will be up early to see the foreign policy view coming out of Renfrewshire House this morning. Not.
No, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, no.
Maybe.
The reason I submitted this amendment to the motion is that I have a lot of sympathy for the aims of CND and a lot of the figures in the Labour Party history who I would admire, like Michael Foot, dare I say, were active in the CND movement. But I think as time has progressed, it's shown that unilateral disarmament hasn't achieved much, or if anything. The peak for the number of nuclear warheads in the world was in 1986, where there was over 70,000 nuclear warheads. Now it's just over 12,000, which has been a reduction in over 80%. And all of that, aside from Ukraine, has been achieved through multilateral negotiations to remove nuclear warheads. So I think if we're being serious about genuinely wanting to achieve results in the reduction of the number of nuclear weapons, then we would all be backing my amendment, to be honest, to call for multilateral negotiations. I agree with some of what Councillor Leishman said. This is a very volatile world, and as time goes on, we are being forced into a binary position of the free, democratic, Western, if you like, countries and authoritarian regimes. The idea that the cause of freedom and Western democracy is advanced by the UK giving up its nuclear weapons unilaterally, which would account for about 1% of the world's nuclear warheads. The idea that that would advance Western democracy is just nearly laughable, I'm sorry to say. Putin and your man in North Korea and Xi Jinping would do nothing but have a wee chuckle to themselves if they read in the papers that we had decided to scrap Trident. So I think that policy at this moment in time would only serve to benefit those. So that is why my motion, and I think there's a difference between my motion and the Conservative motion. My motion does, my amendment, sorry, does take into account that we should be pushing to reduce the number of nuclear warheads, and we should be actively trying to get people around the table like we did in the 80s and 90s to reduce the number of nuclear warheads. So that's me. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Ben. I don't think it's unusual for people to want to debate, worldwide issues or issues that are going to affect us. It wasn't that long ago that we were debating in this chamber and there was a resolution urging Strathclyde Pension Fund to divest of its substantial investments in companies involved in the construction and development of nuclear weapons, which obviously them doing that impacted on the well-being of our constituents. So Yeah, I think it's a matter of whether you think that's important or not. Councillor Clark and Davidson.
I'm going to second the motion and reserve the right to come back in.
Okay. Councillor Maguire, Jamie Maguire.
Thank you, Provost. I support Councillor Smith's amendment as I strongly advocate for the continued presence of Trident due to its dual significance as a deterrent and a substantial source of employment. My stance is grounded on the understanding that Trident not only serves as a strategic deterrent, but also supports approximately 12,000 jobs, making it a crucial element of our national security and economic stability. As we navigate the complexities of international relations, we find ourselves in an era marked by the emergence of a multipolar world. This paradigm shift entails several global powers vying for influence, leading to a heightened state of instability. Political analysts widely acknowledge that this phase is one of the most precarious, characterised by the decline of democracies and the ascendance of autocratic regimes that challenge the established rules-based international order centred on democracy and the rule of law. According to the VDEM Index and Freedom House, democratic attributes are dwindling each year, a concerning trend. In light of these geopolitical realities, it falls upon us to safeguard the freedoms of nations facing tyranny. This can be exemplified by Ukraine's ongoing struggle against Russian imperialism. It is imperative that we extend our support to Ukraine's aspirations for self-determination, freedom and democratic governance. That's why I commend Sir Keir Starmer's commitment to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP in any prospective Labour government. This has now been mirrored by the UK government. Such measures are essential as we witness the repercussions of delayed supplies in Ukraine from the US due to legislative delays, resulting in an alarming discrepancy in military capabilities between Ukraine and Russia, which has resulted in Russian advances due to Ukrainian military only having 1 bullet for every 17 bullets that the Russian military have. But it's not only in Ukraine. All we need to do is look at Lithuania, who are preparing for escalation on their border by the Kremlin puppet state Belarus. A similar development is occurring in Moldova, where Russian military presence is building up on their border. There is a reason why NATO is expanding, and that's a threat that countries are facing to just exist. This is exemplified with the welcome addition of Sweden and Finland to NATO. This has been coupled with a 19% increase in military spending by NATO members, and that's excluding the USA between 2022 and 2023. The current geopolitical situation underscores the urgency of our collective responsibility to uphold democracy and freedom worldwide. While the use of nuclear weapons remains an unthinkable prospect, their existence as a deterrent cannot be understated. It is our duty to step forward and ensure the preservation of democratic values amidst challenging times. We must ensure we continue to be a beacon of hope by globally safeguarding democracy.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, I think you're absolutely right that this is very relevant to the residents of Renfrewshire, because the renewal of Trident would cost £201 billion. Can you imagine what we could do with that in terms of child poverty, the NHS, all the things that Scottish Government get a kicking for? So think about that, £201 billion and our share of that, and what a difference it would make to our society. The world's different from what it was in the 80s. The nuclear threats are different. We've got threats from pandemics, we've got threats from terrorism, terrorist attacks and wars on the ground, a very, very different world. And the irony is that we can replace Trident, spend all that money that could be spent on better things, and Trident will be obsolete soon. We've got underwater drone technology that is being developed now, and that will make Trident targetable, and that makes us on the Clyde a target. So that is terrifying. And, you know, the idea that of arming ourselves to the hilt, like, you know, was the idea in the 80s, terrifies me. I was at school then. And I'll tell you something, I was never more chilled to the bone when I heard Sir Keir Starmer say the words, a nuclear deterrent is only a deterrent if you're prepared to use it. That took me right back to the 80s and I was chilled to the bone. And I've got to be honest, I try very hard not to play politics in this chamber, but I was ashamed of the Labour Party when I heard those words. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Ian Nicholson.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be brief. I mean, Labour in this position is, I would say, mealy-mouthed at best with regards to their view in this one. I'm reminded of the 2015 Labour in Scotland conference, which voted not to renew Trident. But of course, I don't know if that's still a standing policy decision, or did they get the phone call from London telling them, behave yourselves. The relevancy of Trident to this council is clear. They drive over the Erskine Bridge, the D5 missiles. So don't come at us with this idea that somehow, in some shape or form, and Faslane's just up the road, as is Coalport. We've had these discussions before. So you can sit there and fantasise away that we don't have any sort of kind of relationship with this weapon of mass destruction. I'm heartened to hear from our Conservative friends that it's written in the British statute. But we know how that works, don't we? You know, Tony Blair just goes to war without even asking Parliament. Sunak's already saying he's prepared to go to war without. We know how the British statute works. It's not worth the paper it's not written on, because the British parliamentary system does not have written anything if the Parliament decides to do whatever it wants. So that's a nonsense for a start. I've often looked at this issue with regards to Trident and all the excuses that come up. We've heard it today about the SALT 1, the SALT 2 treaties, all the rest of it. Oh, it's all been reduced from 70,000 missiles down to 12. Those 12,000 missiles are far more destructive power. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about numbers here. We're talking about the destructive power that's now involved in these missiles today. And they try and obscure all these facts. They try and make out, well, we've only got 12,000 of them now, that's okay, isn't it? You can wipe out the whole planet with, you know, about 5,000 missiles if you want to. A thing that always struck my mind, and nobody who's pro-Trident, I'm not going to go bother about jobs and all that as well. That takes you in another realm about, you know, defending dodgy issues because there's jobs attached to it. That's nonsense. I've often asked people who defend, how do you deter a maniac? Does anybody want to tell us? How do you deter a maniac? If Hitler had nuclear weapons, how do you deter him? You can't deter him, because Trident is a in fact, it was said here today, Trident's a retaliation. It's not a deterrent. It's a revenge weapon designed to kill millions of people. And those millions of people didn't make a decision to launch nuclear weapons. The leadership did, the politicians did. But Trident is there to kill them in revenge for their leadership launching nuclear missiles. And as some of my colleagues here said today, technology has moved on now. Trident can be tracked, traced, destroyed within seconds. You know, our seabeds around the world now are going to get filled up with anti-missile systems. Trident is a useless piece of junk which we spend billions on, which could be better spent. And I accept the fact that Councillor Maguire said we should spend more. That's an issue, because the amount of money that's been committed to Trident has sucked the life out of investment into traditional military armament, if that's what you want to do. But we prefer to have that money spent on social issues and social matters. So as I say, my point of view here is, and nobody's going to be able to answer the question, how do you deter a maniac? You can't. You can't deter them. And for Labour to come along today and start talking about North Korea and Russia as if it's 1981, it's nonsense. They can't get their act together on this issue. As I said, I'm very conscious that this council has got a right to discuss this issue, and it will do it as well, as long as they keep driving Trident missiles over the Erskine Bridge and up into Faslane. And you can sit there and take all your instructions you want from London, because that's what you're doing, because your part of the conference actually backed non-renewal of Trident. And now you can't even bring yourself to admit that either. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jim Pattison.
Thanks, Provost. Suppose to take the back a wee bit, I suppose anti-Trident, anti-nuclear weapons is one of the few political positions I've steadfastly held in my political life. I've changed a few others, but I've not changed that. And that takes me back to when Bruce Kent came to my school back in primary school, and he spoke about the kind of Trident and the kind of pomp and ceremony and the militarisation of our culture, and how even our language at times, and that always stuck with me. So I've always been vehemently anti-nuclear weapons for any country. Now, we've heard a lot of talk today about Tehran, Beijing, Moscow, but I'm only aware of one country ever dropping the bomb, and they were a Western civilized democracy. So let's not kid ourselves that it's only the threat's only for one side. You know, here there's only, whether they did right or wrong, they did it. I'm not debating that, but I'm saying that is the only documented account of ever dropping a nuclear weapon, and we know the outcome of that. So to suggest that it's some kind of Bond villain, like in some kind of foreign country that's got their finger in the button, it's our elected representatives, and I don't always have confidence. I've got more confidence in the current incumbent of the White House than I do his predecessor, and possibly his successor. So you've got all that to factor into that somehow that we don't end up with the bad actors in charge of our governments is probably what I would suggest there. The employment argument is one I've heard a lot. I'll take it at face value. How much are we going to save if we don't renew Trident? 200 billion. We'll give every one of those 12,000 people £1 million redundancy then, if it's that important, and then we'll still save money. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument to make to me about employment. Councillor Nicholson touched on it. Where do you draw the line? And that if it creates jobs, keep it. I'm sure the slave trade created plenty of jobs back here when it was, but it doesn't mean it was the right thing to do. So I mean, that argument doesn't hold any water to me. I know it's a particular argument that's been made, but if we're given titles today, Dame Jackie Bailey, Sir Keir Starmer, Dame Jackie Bailey, and that's fine because she's a local representative of that area. I fully get that she kind of split for the pack on that one, and she did what was right for her and what she felt was right for her constituents. But to kind of suggest that that's something that I want to be taken into account when, as Councillor Nicholson said, these weapons are driven through our communities. I wonder if Sir Keir would be as keen on these weapons where they were stored near his constituency, although obviously practically speaking that wouldn't be the case unless you stored them in the Thames, I suppose. But that's the kind of point here. It's easy and it's abstract for a lot of people. It's not abstract for us. I have relatives that work at Faslane, but it doesn't negate the fact that I think it's the incorrect thing for us to do. So that's just really my points on it. I don't have anything else to add apart from I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Audrey Doig.
Hi there. I'm quite surprised that the Labour Party have put this amendment up or replacement up, because you won't know, Ben, but you might be informed that this organisation, as in Renfrewshire Council members, have been members of the Nuclear 3 local authority since its incision in Scotland over 30 years ago, and that's including Labour administrations. We haven't broken our membership of the NFLA in all that time, and that's why I'm really surprised that the Labour Party have backed you in coming forward with this, because the NFLA don't want anything on the Clyde or anywhere. And quite honestly, just like Jim said, if it's so safe and so protected and so needed, keep it on the Thames where it can affect them if they were bombed first time, because that's where we would be. We would be basically, if not dead from the explosion, we would be sick with radiation and would not survive, because we're only 30 miles away from it. No 300, no 600, right on our doorstep. That's why it's so important to people in Scotland to get rid of that off our waters. Not only that, there's hillsides full of nuclear warheads that, as Councillor Nicholas said, are driven up to Scotland for replacements because the fuel dispenses and we have to get the fuel taken out, and it drives back down through our roads to go back down to England to get dealt with. The cost of all that is astronomical. The cost of nuclear weapons so far has cost Great Britain 400 billion. 400 billion. What could we have done with that in the last few years? Unbelievable amount of work could have been done in the NHS and our education and everywhere, all over Britain. But it costs Scotland in itself 32 billion is the cost to Scotland for that. 32 billion that could have been spent in all sorts of great services in Scotland. It annually costs us £1 billion to look after nuclear weapons on the Clyde. Oh, what we could have done with that money. It costs us 22 billion to clean nuclear waste, both from the weapons and nuclear power. So don't tell me that nuclear power is clean. It's only clean to produce in a building, but as soon as they have got to get taken out and disregarded, and as we all know, they don't always stay safe wherever they're put, the waste. You look up at the north of Scotland and how many particles are on beaches that have come out of nuclear power stations because they're blown up instead of staying safe. So don't tell Scotland nuclear power's clean and okay, that nuclear power weapons on the Clyde are safe. We're not safe. It's not clean. We don't need nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doig. I can confirm, Audrey, it's complete wipeout for us. Complete wipeout. Councillor Andy Doig. Just to give you a wee positive note.
Thanks, Provost. In relation to some of the points raised, I'd like to respond. Can I say, first of all, Provost, I mean, I come from a different position from yourself and your SNP colleagues. I mean, I would like to see an independent Scotland that had a Swiss-style defence policy. Now, it's far from being a pacifist kind of policy. We would need to have probably national conscription. We'd probably need to have community alternatives to that. But if we're serious about defending ourselves, and I think we should be, then that's a route we would need to look at. I'd rather not have NATO membership, because membership of any kind of military alliance drags you automatically into war situations. It doesn't necessarily make you safer, quite the opposite, it can make you less unsafe. But Councillor Maguire's point about jobs, the STUC did a study, I think it was 2006, about the economic loss if Trident was removed from the Clyde. And I think they estimated, and I don't think that the Bartonshire Labour parliamentarians were too happy at the time, but they concluded that the dividend was nearer to 300 than 3,000. So the SDUC and the wider Labour movement have taken that position. They've analysed the situation from a trade union position. So the 3,000 jobs is far, far exaggerated. In response to Councillor Leishman's point about it is independent, Tony Benn MP established in the 1970s using Hansard questions that in fact the deterrent was not under the independent control of the UK. It'll be under the control of NATO High Command, I would assume, which is essentially the US. But I think the Labour amendment and Ben's point as well. Councillor Smith had a wee pop at Councillor Devine about Councillor Devine's comments about Sleepy Joe. He might like to know public opinion does matter, and the governments do pay attention to what people say, and so they should, because people have got a right to be heard in these issues. A quick story from history. In 1981 at the SNP conference was a motion passed to say that the SNP believed that Scotland should be out of NATO. And the SNP at that time had 2 MPs and 11% of the vote. It wasn't exactly a major player in 1981. And yet the American consulate was in that hall at the back. So stating a position in here in Renfrewshire can have an effect, and it can have an opinion, and it can change opinions. And we're right to have this debate here today. But I have to say as well, I don't know how many Labour parties there actually are. Councillor Nicholson spoke about the 2015 decision of the Scottish Labour Party not to renew Trident. There's been many, many more Scottish Labour conferences that have taken that position. And there's many, many Labour activists, Scottish Labour activists, that have then gone on to be MPs and changed their tune. But I have to say as well to Councillor Smith, why is the elephant in the room not being called out here? Because quite honestly, the nuclear deterrent, as he would call it, the Trident is being retained by the UK as it's a phallocentric symbol to make sure the UK still has a seat in the UN Security Council. That's the elephant in the room. And we know why Keir Starmer is ignoring thousands of Scottish Labour activists over the years who have campaigned against this, because he wants to play to the south of England audience. So that begs the question, How much power does the Scottish Labour Party have within the UK Labour Party? What's the power relations? And at the end of the day, it seems to me as if both Labour and Tory councillors in this chamber are willing to settle for the annihilation of 3/4 of the Scottish people in order to meet the UK's so-called security needs. But I do think there's, as I said, there's people in all parties that believe in nuclear disarmament, and there are dangers. I mean, I know more than most people passionately Councillor Doig feels about this, and but there's dangers for the SNP as well, Provost. And I feel I've got a duty to let you know about this.
Thank you.
I mean, I do. No, I really do. Because you may not have noticed. I've got a duty to let you know about this. This is no laughing matter here. I mean, the SNP should be proud of its 6-year commitment against nuclear weapons on the Clyde, along with the growth of the Scottish folk music movement. That was one of the reasons, the 2 reasons that the SNP grew massively politically in the 1960s. But there are voices in the SNP, like the external Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson, MSP, who on the 4th of March this year said single-handedly an independent Scotland would not sign the prohibition of nuclear weapons treaty because it might compromise NATO membership. So I think it might be a case for my SNP colleagues here, maybe Labour and the Conservatives are the opposition today in this debate in this chamber, but be wary of the enemy within that's behind you, who wears a black and yellow rosette. Thank you.
Comment. What is it? Point of order? That, I would say that's a point of order. Okay. Okay, are we okay to stop just now and come back? Okay. Look, I was going to have a break round a bit now, if it's all right with you. Well, yeah. Okay, you're allowed to do that? No, you're not allowed to do that, sorry. Okay, well, let's just take a 10-minute break. Okay, and then we'll come back.
Right, okay.
No, it's fine. I did say at 1 o'clock we would look